Righty, we're going to try again. I think the volume might be working this time. Third time's a charm. Hopefully, I apologize for that. Very unprofessional of me to not get the audio up and running. But we are here to discuss the Warriors' fourth defeat of the season, a 104-94 loss to the San Antonio Spurs at Frostbank Center on Saturday. Disappointing. That's all that can be really said about this game. The Warriors appeared in complete control, up 17 with just under 2 minutes, to go in the third quarter. Kevon Looney makes a layup, which makes it 81-64. And from there, the Spurs outscore the Warriors 40-13 over the remainder of the game, including, just a fourth quarter that the Warriors went completely ice cold. They could do nothing to push against the wave of momentum that was coming from the Spurs, their home crowd, and it must be said, some questionable refereeing decisions. I don't want to, we can discuss how much that was a factor, and if you want to in the comments, by all means, go for it. But I don't want to use that as an excuse. I'm sure the Warriors won't use it as an excuse. They simply were not good enough offensively for the majority of the game, but obviously particularly in the last 12 to 14 minutes there, where they went completely ice cold. They scored 4 points across the final nearly 7 minutes. I think Steph made a three with 6:38 to go, which made it 90-86. And then the Warriors scored 4 points for the remainder of the game and lost 104-94. Just one of those games where there's probably a number of factors that go into it, where the Warriors have been flirting with these big leads that they've kind of lost and they've had to re-win games, and they've kind of got away with it on a few occasions. You go back to the Houston game where they're up 30 and it goes to overtime. You talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder game where they're up 30 and I think the Thunder get it back to 4 or 5 or something like that. There's been other games, even yesterday's game against the Pelicans, where you're up double figures or whatever and the game looks relatively comfortable, and then all of a sudden the Pels actually have a shot to tie or win the game on their final offensive possession. So they've kind of got away with it, the Warriors, but this time they simply didn't. And I think there was certainly a factor of third game in 4 nights here, and that was potentially, again, I don't know how much you want to play into that, but third game in 4 nights, I always looked at this game as something being relatively difficult and problematic. Brody says audio is mint now. Okay, good to hear. Let me know what your thoughts on the game were, Brody, or anyone else that's tuning in at the moment. But yeah, third game in 4 nights is always difficult. Like if you just look at the math of NBA history, it's it's pretty tough, especially on the road when you've with 3 of those games in different cities. One back home at Chase Center, and then you've obviously got New Orleans and now San Antonio. It's difficult, and I thought the Warriors actually came out really well for a team that is rather aging when you talk about Steph and Draymond. Even guys like Wiggs and Loon to a degree are hitting their 30s. And so I thought they came out really well. They came out of the gates. They were in control of the game for the majority. They built, a 12-point lead by either the end of the first or early second quarter. Buddy Hield came out, made 3 threes off the bench. Bench unit kind of took control for a bit, then lost control a little bit. Warriors still go in with a 12-point lead at halftime, 50-38. The Spurs, I felt like they really got in. I tweeted out, it's kind of crazy how much the Warriors have kind of got opposing teams into their style of game so much. Like if you're an opposing coach, you kind of look at the Warriors and think, they're relatively small. Let's try and pound them on the inside as much as we can. But the Warriors, through so many of these games, through the first, 16 games of the season, they've got opposing teams playing the way they want to play in terms of playing quickly and chucking up a heap of threes. And the Spurs actually take a heap of threes as it is. They take like 39 per game. But they took 26 in the first half. Like they were on track to take 13 or 14 more than what they normally do. And it just felt like the Spurs were playing into the Warriors' hands. Wemby in particular was playing into the Warriors' hands with just how many threes they were taking. And just under 2 minutes left, and you think, yep, this is going to be the Warriors' 13th win of the season. They're going to go to 13-3, and on we go to face Brooklyn at Chase Center on Monday. And then they just take the foot off the gas. There's a couple of turnovers late in the third quarter that I think lead to a Spurs 3, and then maybe an easy 2 as well. All of a sudden, it's back down to 10 at the end of the third, and you think, okay, that's given the Spurs some life and opportunity that they shouldn't have really had. I think that final 2 minutes of the third quarter was just really the difference to me, because if you have a 15, 17-point lead there entering the fourth quarter, a lot of young teams would just pack it in and say, okay, we're going to try and do some individual stuff now, try and throw up some shots, just ill-advised stuff, and you've got control of the game. But once you allow them to get back to 10 points and then single figures, then the belief builds and they're like, oh, hang on a second, we can actually win this game, particularly when they've got the home fans behind them. And the Warriors just didn't have an answer offensively. They did not have an answer. They scored 13 points in the final, 13 and a half minutes essentially. Brody says, didn't get to watch, unfortunately. I was putting in the hard yards working at Woolies. Good old Woolies. Yeah, I'm more of a Coles man myself. Actually, that's a lie. I go to Woolies and Coles. But anyway, yeah, it was a disappointing game. For the Warriors, I think it goes to show you how valuable Kuminga can still be to this team, because that early fourth quarter where the Warriors essentially have almost all their bench unit, there is just not enough offense when you've got Slow-Mo out there with Loon. And then the biggest issue is Pods. Like Pods to me right now, he's becoming such a non-scoring threat. Like I thought yesterday's game against the Pearls was a bit of an improvement. Like he took 11 shots, made 5 of them, still missed all his threes, but like he was looking a bit more aggressive. Today was just like he took 3 shots. Like it wasn't like he was missing shots. He just didn't take them. He was 0 of 3 in 15 and a half minutes, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, a turnover, a team low -14. Not a good game for those of you that want to be really, backing Pods, who is getting obviously a lot of flack at the moment for his play. And for those of you that are trying to back Pods as hard as you can, and a Pod stands, I suppose, not a good performance for them, because it was more of what we've seen in terms of just not enough of an offensive threat to be a viable backup point guard right now. And it again goes down to the Warriors have some holes here. Like they are 12-4 in a great spot record wise, but they have some serious holes in terms of the shooting guard spot with Melton now out. I think they could still certainly look for an upgrade at center on TJD, who I thought was pretty good for the majority of the game. I actually thought he did a fair job on Wemby. Wemby kind of lived on the perimeter too much. And I know the Spurs got the result, but just from a basketball fan, like I just want Wemby to try and find a better balance between perimeter jumpers and working on the inside. Like he had a nice play in the fourth quarter where, because he was taking so many threes, the Warriors like actually jumped at him once, kind of put the ball on the floor, got to the rim, had a nice finger roll layup. And I think the Warriors were forced to take a timeout after that. And as a Warrior fan, I was obviously disappointed that, we just given up 2 points. But as a basketball fan, it's like, okay, why don't you do that more often? You can put the ball on the floor, try and get to the rim more often rather than living on the outside. So ultimately, the Warriors, they just didn't have enough offense in the second half. And the Spurs did start hitting some shots. The offensive rebounding in the second half was a real nightmare for the Warriors. Like, I think, again, how much of that comes down to third game in 4 nights. Just the Spurs' intensity lifted. Just looking at the offensive rebounding numbers here. Okay, well, it was apparently, it just didn't feel like that. Apparently, it was 17-9 to the Warriors. I can't see actually what it was in the second half, but I hope people are with me. People, if you actually watched the game, you would probably you could understand how much the offensive boards and second chance opportunities were hurting the Warriors in that kind of early fourth quarter period. I don't know. I just went off a win there and just said that based on the eye test. Like that's how it felt. It just felt like the Spurs were getting these second, third opportunities and making the most of it. And then you look at the offensive rebounds and it's 17-9. I can't see actually, it won't let me see what it was in the fourth quarter. But anyway, FTW Clint says the bench did not look good at all without Kuminga, but he started off hot but went scoreless in the second half. Moody and Pods were not very good, especially Pods. FTW Clint says ever since Greg Pop hasn't been coaching, Wemby been pulling a ton of threes. Yeah, I think he's been taking a fair few threes, in general, even when Pop, before his health scare or stroke or whatever, which we hope he recovers fully from, and fingers crossed for him and his family and the Spurs. But I know Pop was asked about it, and he said that basically he wants Wemby to explore all facets of his offensive game, which clearly includes taking a heap of threes and handling the ball a fair bit. He had 9 assists today. I thought he played quite well, aside from how many threes he took. What did he go, 4 of 12 or something from 3-point range, I think? what was he? 4 of 13 in the end, 9 of 21 from the floor. So like 13 of your 21 field goal attempts being from three when you're 7'4". I don't know. The Spurs shoot 13 of 47, 27.7% from deep. Again, I actually think they kind of lived in the Warriors' favor. Like I think the Warriors still had the game on their hands in the style they wanted to play. They just couldn't hit shots themselves in the second half. Like Steph, 5 of 16. Wiggs started off brilliantly, and then once he cooled off, he had 15 points in the first half. Once he cooled off in the second half, where were the Warriors going? Like there just wasn't like Wiggs ends up 6 of 16, 4 of 10. Draymond 0 of 5, 0 of 3, didn't have it offensively tonight. Trey 6 of 12, got a few rolling to the rim, but that's about it. Waters 4 of 12. Steph, as I said, 5 of 16. GP 2 of 4. Moses 2 of 8. Buddy 4 of 9. Made his first 4 shots, I think, and then must have missed his next 5. Looney 4 of 5, I thought played pretty well. Probably one of the bigger positives to the Warriors, although he only played 12 minutes, 40 seconds. Pods again, 0 of 3. And then Slow-Mo, 3 of 5, 0 of 1. Warriors shoot 37.9% and 31.8% from three. You're just not going to win games. Like, you're not going to win games in that scenario where you shoot less than 38% from the floor and less than 32% from three-point range. So the Warriors have got some holes. The shooting guard spot, still not sure Waters is your long-term plan, really. The center position, TJD's okay at the moment, but I think you could certainly do with an upgrade. And then the bench. So right now, the Warriors are, I mean, we've spoken so much about their depth, right, and how good their depth is and how much it's, propelled them to this 12-4 start to the season. But these last few games, it's shown that they're still quite reliant on Steph, on Dre, on Wiggs. And particularly Wiggs over the last few games. Like, they obviously don't win on yesterday against the Pearls without Wiggs. They clearly don't have a 12-point lead at halftime without Wiggs in this game. And then once he cools off, no one's there to kind of pick up the slack. He's kind of the offensive staff for the Warriors at the moment, because you had that game against Atlanta where Steph only took 10 field goal attempts. He was very efficient, but only took 10 field goal attempts. Yesterday, Steph only took 13, goes 5 of 16 today. It feels like Steph's playing cat and mouse a little bit. Now, I don't know, maybe there's an issue with the knee bursitis there, which is not allowing him to be, or maybe mentally he's not wanting to be as aggressive as he normally is because of that knee bursitis. But I kind of spoke about it, I think it was yesterday, where I feel like he picks and chooses sometimes throughout a long regular season, which I think is fine to a degree, where he's like, okay, big game in Oklahoma City, in Boston, in Clay's homecoming against the Mavericks. Like, I'm going to be up and about. I'm going to be aggressive from the first whistle in those ones and really go out and prove a point. And then these last couple of games, like versus the Hawks, at New Orleans, at San Antonio, Steph's just like, I might just like defer a little bit and like let Wiggs get going, try and get Buddy Hield going early when JK is playing, try and get him going, trying to defer. And I don't hate it. Like, the guy is 36, nearly 37 years old in year 16. Like, I can understand. I think when you reach that age with the miles that he's had on his legs, you can completely understand, okay, let's not go 110% flat out every single game across the course of a regular season. Let's try and preserve ourselves if we can. Let's try and get through the regular season, be primed, ready to go for a playoff run, particularly when the team's deep. And Steph would look at this team and say, okay, we've got other guys that can score the ball. Wiggins, Buddy, Kuminga when he's playing. But I also think, like, at some point, there's probably also a case of Steph thinking to himself, okay, if I really need to, I can pull it out and I can really get going. And I think we've seen that a few times where Steph has, quieter games, and then the last 5-6 minutes, he's like, okay, now it's time for me to turn it on. And he does. Felt to me when he made that 3 with 6:38 to go to put the Warriors up 4 after I think Wemby had cut it to 1. It felt to me at that point, I as a fan sat back and thought, okay, all right, now it's Steph time. All right, you've been quiet the whole game. You haven't done a whole lot from a scoring perspective. Now it's Steph time. He'll take over. We'll win the game. And he didn't do that. And it's very difficult to ask someone to do that on a consistent basis, to all of a sudden in the final 5-6 minutes of a game just burst to life and start hitting shots and start taking shots at a rate you hadn't done for the first 3.5 quarters. Now, Steph is capable of doing that, but I'm just saying asking him to do it every game, I think as a fan, it's probably unfair for me to expect in that moment to say, oh, yeah, Steph just made a three. Now we're going to start rolling. Now we're going to win the game. That's probably a pretty arrogant way to look at it. And if Steph's looking at it that way, if Steph's looking at it as, you know what, I'm just going to defer, be less aggressive, let my teammates roll. And then, you know, when the game gets going, 5-6 minutes left and I need to pull it out, then I can pull it out. I mean, you're Steph Curry, you probably can afford to be arrogant, but that's probably a pretty arrogant way to play as well. And I'm not saying he's doing that, but you would like him to be more aggressive throughout the game rather than get to a point where, hey, Steph's struggling a little bit. We've got 5-6 minutes left. We need to get some offense going, and relying on Steph to kind of flick a switch and make that happen. It's difficult to do. GameRef2P says, without JK and Buddy, the bench is bad if Pods and Draymond is not scoring games. Can't have Pods and Draymond not scoring. We can't win at all. We got to play smart and decisive. Yeah, I mean, you just can't have too many non-scorers out there. And this is the entire issue, is I would still like the Warriors to have a guy in the front court who, I mean, they do have it in JK. Like, JK is a scorer and he's clearly a power forward, maybe a small forward, whatever argument you want to make there. But I think another front court shooter, another guy who spaces the floor, another guy who can, you know, hit 5 or 6 threes and go off. I don't know. I'm starting to kind of talk myself into Cam Johnson a little bit. I was kind of writing about it earlier. He's coming off back-to-back games of 37 and 34 points. He's averaging over 19 points on the season now on over 42% three-point shooting, taking over 8 attempts from 3 a game. Seems like a pretty good Warrior fit offensively. And that, like, if you just plugged him into the Lindy Waters role, he's just like a far better, bigger Lindy Waters the third. Really, like Cam Johnson's just like a super juiced version of him. And so if you just plugged him into the starting lineup and had Wiggs move down to the 2 with Wiggs, Johnson, Draymond, TJD, is that enough? I don't know. I would almost prefer still to try and get a skilled big man, a scoring big man, who you could place next to Draymond, and then you could do something else where you still push Wiggins to the 2, or Moody starts, or maybe you could get away with Pods in that scenario. Maybe you make another trade for someone elsewhere. Maybe it's Kuminga, maybe it's Buddy Hield. Like, you'd have a heap of options there. I don't know. It's just difficult. That kind of early fourth quarter lineup where there's like Looney, Anderson, Pods, and it's really Pods, because like we know we've got a history. Kyle Anderson's not a scorer. Kevon Looney's not a scorer. That's not their roles, and it doesn't need to be when, you know, they're bigger guys, right? They're there to defend, rebound, set screens, good passes, particularly slow-mo. He can handle the ball and play make a little bit. It's really like, if you're a guard and you're Brandon Pajemski, there's no reason that any guard in this league should be at this level in this year of NBA basketball. Like, you just can't have a non-scoring threat as a guard. And the Warriors already kind of have one in GP2, but at least he brings elite defense. Pods right now, I'm not exactly sure what he's bringing. Like, yes, he can do a little bit of everything, but right now, this was one of my concerns when we were talking about him last season and what like level he could get, even during the offseason when he starts talking about, you know, I want to be one of the league's young stars and whatever else. Like, okay, what's this guy excel at? What's his point of difference to make him an absolute top level star player? And I just don't know what he excels at, right? He excels at taking charges. Okay, cool. But that no one's ever been known. No one's ever remembered in NBA history as an elite charge taker, right? No one does that. No one has that. So what does he do at an elite level? I don't know. GameRef2, a few comments here. Anima King says, you'll understand why Kuminga is important on nights 3-pointers can't fall. Yeah. Like, Warriors, again, 31.8% from 3, 14 of 44, just crying out, particularly in the non-Wemby minutes. I know he played majority of the game, but particularly in the non-Wemby minutes, which, you know, I think if you look at the numbers here, just having a look, Yeah, so Wemby's a plus 16. The Spurs are -6 in the minutes Wemby didn't play. And particularly in those minutes, like Zach Collins as your backup center. I think if Kuminga's out there and Zach Collins is kind of protecting the paint, I don't think Kuminga's too concerned. Kuminga's not concerned about many players, but Zach Collins, not sure he's going to be too concerned. And even like going at Wemby, right? Like there are a couple of times where, Wiggs and I think Moses might have done as well. I don't know. Like there are times where you can, if you get into his body, he's obviously slight. You can try him at the rim. Now it's not usually a good tactic, but maybe with a guy like Kuminga, it's like, no, we will actually try him. I think Weeks did it a couple of occasions. I don't know. You don't want to be like, you don't want to have him in your head all the time. Like you don't want to say, well, okay, Wemby's on the floor. We're just not going to try it at the rim. We're not going to attack the paint and at least try. Like it's too many times, I think, teams and even the Warriors, like Pods had one today where Pods just saw Wemby and was like, okay, I'm just dribbling it back out. I'm not even going to try. And I think teams still probably get too much in their head about that. It's like you don't have to dribble the ball out when he's around the paint every time. I know he's an elite defensive player. He's a completely unique defensive player. Absolutely understand that. But it doesn't mean you just put it away entirely. Gamer FTP says, yep, JK is important. It was shown this game. I've seen Draymond and Pods give up so many open shots tonight. We lost a 17-point lead. How much was Pods plus minus? Pods was a -14. Yeah, not ideal. And most of that came late third, early fourth, where, yeah, he's just not playing well. I thought yesterday was an improvement, but it was kind of a poor game again today. I don't know. There's, again, whole shooting guard spot, center spot, scoring, just finding another scorer, and probably the backup point guard spot. Do you want, again, I'm willing to give Pods a couple of months here. Like the Warriors are still in a good spot record-wise, and therefore they can afford to be patient on this. But if Dennis Schroeder's available at the trade deadline for something reasonable, do you just pull the trigger on that and say, okay, we want Dennis Schroeder in like a specialist 6-man backup point guard role, and maybe he can play some minutes next to Steph, maybe to get Steph off the ball and play Steph as like a 2 guard running off screens and stuff like that? I don't know, maybe. But like we'll just have to wait and see what happens if Pods can turn this around. But if this continues, then the Warriors have still too many playoff question marks for me. And the issue is like, you're not going to know any of this really until playoff time. But if I'm just projecting forward and we think this is a playoff team, it's like, okay, opposing teams are really going to be scared in a 7-round playoff series of Lindy Waters as the starting 2 guard, of Trace Jackson Davis as the starting 5, of Brandon Bajemski as the backup point guard. Teams really going to be worried about that and nervous about that. I think the Warriors can try and find upgrades across the board here in multiple areas, and it's almost a positive, like, because they can make upgrades. Like they've got the young players, they've got the draft assets to be able to do so. They can make upgrades, they can get better. The young, and if it's not via trade, then maybe the young players just get better themselves, and that is obviously an improvement. Swellmole says, what about a trade for Brogdon? Put him in pod spot and there's more scoring and spacing for the other bench shooters while bringing the same or better defense. Malcolm Brogdon's an interesting name. He's just returned for the Wizards, clearly 6-man with the Celtics a couple of years ago. My only issue with him is he's on over 20 million a season, isn't he? Isn't he on like early 20s? Let's just look this up. Malcolm Brogdon contract. Because that's my issue, is like, I don't want to be spending $20+ million on a backup. If I'm paying someone $20+ million, they better be starting for me. Yeah, he's on a 2-year. Oh no, that's he's on a 2-year, $45 million contract. $22.5 million this season. So like, you have to be giving up considerable pieces there from a salary standpoint, because clearly, like, Wiggins, you're just not trading for anyone right now. Like, unless they're a top 10 player in the league, like Andrew Wiggins, you're just not trading him for basically anyone at this point. And so it's got to be a number of these role players. And it's like, okay, are you trading 3 role players for Malcolm Brogdon? to be your backup point guard on $22.5 million. So Melton's obviously one that you'd give up, but then you got to get another $10 million in salary to get to Brogdon. That's the issue. That's why like Schroeder's making 13 or something. Like I think you can get him just by giving up Melton. And that's why Schroeder would make some sense to me. So Brogdon, from a fit standpoint, absolutely, I'm with you, but just the contract just makes that too difficult, in my opinion. Gamer F2P says the best 5-man lineup in the NBA is Spurs leading in net rating. They did beat OKC too. Yeah, they're good. They're good. Let's not take anything away from them. Yeah, that they're a good team. I don't think they'll be a playoff team, but they'd certainly be a playoff team in the East. If we had the NBA eliminating the Western Eastern Conference and just went 1 through 16 for the playoffs, then I think the Spurs would certainly make it. Wemby is absolutely unbelievably good. And they've got some veterans there now who are kind of leading the way. Like CP didn't play great, but he's been obviously helpful for them. Harrison Barnes has been helpful. Stephon Castle is fantastic. Like you have Castle and Wembanyama is your young tandem going forward. That's scary. Devin Vassell didn't even play in this one. Neither did Keldon Johnson, so they had guys out as well. They've got a good team, and obviously Wemby. I don't think anyone else. There's no one else in the league you'd take over Wemby right now. Maybe Jokic. That's an interesting question. Like if your franchise started tomorrow, would you take Wemby or Jokic? Don't know. Maybe Jokic's still got enough years left to take him. But anyway, FTW Clan says Cam Johnson. Yeah, I just spoke about him. The Johnson one's interesting because again, he's making $23.6 million, but at least with him, you could say, oh, he's a starter. Like you push Wiggins down to the 2, you fit Cam Johnson in, and then you've still got Draymond and TJD. It would probably be something like Melton. I think you'd have to give up Kuminga. Because Cam Johnson's still got 2 years, over $45 million left on his contract after this season. And so if you're going to trade for Cam Johnson and be paying him, then I think that's a fair indication that, hey, we don't want to pay Kuminga that kind of amount either in restricted free agency. And therefore, it would be a case of putting Kuminga in a Cam Johnson trade. And maybe Brooklyn go for that. Maybe Brooklyn say, yeah, like we actually like the upside. Maybe do the Warriors have to throw in a pick? If the Warriors have to throw in a pick, that's where it probably gets questionable for me. But if it's like Melton, Kuminga, to make the salaries work, you'd have to give up GP2. I think I saw one where it was like Melton, Kuminga, and Looney for Cam Johnson and Day'Ron Sharpe to make the salaries work. And then you could have a handshake agreement with Melton and Loon that, hey, we'll bring you guys back in free agency next summer. And so therefore it would essentially be Kuminga for Cam Johnson. And if that was viable from a trade standpoint, I don't know, has Kuminga's value dropped enough where you wouldn't be able to get Cam Johnson for him straight up? Maybe it has. Maybe you'd have to throw a pick in there as well. But I could also see Brooklyn talking themselves into it, thinking, yeah, like we can just get this guy. Cam Johnson's probably going to be too helpful for us in winning right now that we would prefer to have Kuminga and just let him do whatever the hell he wants basically and see who he can become in the long term because he has the higher upside compared to a guy like Cam Johnson who's 28 now. I don't know. Swellmole says Pods plus Kuminga plus Melton might be something possible. Well, you can definitely get Cam Johnson for that. That works salary-wise, except the issue is you got to fill out the remainder of your roster. So any of these 3-for-1 trades, they've kind of got to send out a little bit more salary so you can actually sign guys afterwards to fill out the rest of your roster. FTW Clan says, I feel like it would hurt the locker room to lose Looney. Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. Could it be GP2 instead, or does that also impact your locker room? I also don't like giving up Melton and GP2 in a trade because therefore you're losing a lot of perimeter defense. FTW Clan says, but at the same time, I really want the Warriors to do whatever it takes to get Curry a 5th ring. I know it goes down to something that Mike Dunleavy Jr. said during the off-season, just before the season. It's like we don't want to make a move just to get slightly better kind of thing and just be an above-average team. And does a Steph, Wiggins, Cam Johnson, Draymond, TJD starting 5, is that good enough to be a championship team? I know, where's your level? If the Warriors pull that off, right, You tell me, if the Warriors pulled off a Cam Johnson trade where they're giving up like Kuminga, Melton, and let's say it's Looney, whatever, and they're getting Cam Johnson and Day'Ron Sharpe back. Okay, you've made that trade. What's the absolute base you have to get to for that trade to be considered a success this season? Because you are making it for the now, right? You are making it, as you say, to try and get Steph a fifth ring this season. What's the baseline level you have to get to? Or is it simply a case of, we evaluate it over time, clearly, because you're going to have Cam Johnson for a number of years, hopefully, and then Kuminga is going to have time to develop in Brooklyn and see what he becomes. At this point, I'm not sure that Kuminga is ever going to become who he wants to become at Golden State, but we'll wait and see. Being on for just over 30 minutes here, I'll probably finish it up soon. Anything else from this game? I thought Wiggs was excellent again. He's playing so well at the moment. I kind of spoke about him a lot on the post-game live yesterday. He didn't hit shots in the second half. Again, finished a 6 of 16, but 20 points. That's what his fifth game in a row with 20-plus points. Whichever. He's playing so well at the moment. It's clearly the best stretch he's been in since the 2021-22 All-Star season. Has 5 rebounds, 3 assists as well. Playing so well. Swellmole says, Milton, JK, Pods for Brogdon becomes a 10-man rotation with backups at every position. I don't like giving up JK and Pods for Brogdon. Again, to me, like that's so is Brogdon starting next to Steph in the backcourt? I don't know. That's just, I'm not giving up Kuminga and Pajemski. I know Pods isn't playing well at the moment, but I'm not giving up both young players for a 6-man who's very injury prone. Like I'm not doing that. FTW Clan says, unfortunately, Milton has to go. I wish he was healthy because he seemed like a great fit, but we need someone better at his position. He can't just take up a roster spot being out for the season. I agree. I think Milton will get traded. I really, really hope that they have a conversation to him and say, hey, mate, like, we want to try and make a deep playoff run this season. You can't help us do that. Your salary could get us someone that can help us do that. And therefore, we are going to look to trade you. However, rest assured, like, we want you back. And so the Warriors can legally trade DeAnthony Melton and then re-sign him as a free agent next offseason. And I think that would be the perfect scenario. And one where I think he looks like he's got a mature head on his shoulders. He's a bit of an experienced, an experienced vet now, like he's 6-7 years into the league. I think he would understand that scenario. Now, maybe he goes the other way and it's like, if you trade me, I'm never coming back here again. But maybe he's mature enough and there's a good enough relationship there to be like, hey, we're going to trade you, but we want you back. And that, they trade him by February and he's back on the team in July come free agency. FTW Clan says, bringing DiVincenzo back might be nice. Yeah, I spoke about that on the post-game live yesterday. He's another one where kind of straight swap for Melton. But the issue is for him is that, like, why would the Timberwolves take on Melton? Why would they do that when they're going to want to be the Timberwolves would have to be like just completely fall apart and be a complete disaster and be out of playoff aspirations by the deadline to be like, okay, we're going to take on an injured guy who's not going to play for us. Or the Warriors would have to give up like significant draft assets or something else to make it worthwhile, because otherwise maybe you can get Dante with another package, but I don't think it would include Melton, and therefore it'd just be difficult. So, the Warriors are going to have some interesting decisions to make. I think the whole Melton injury, as unfortunate as it is, has certainly risen trade speculation because it does leave a hole at the starting two-guard spot that I'm not sure Lindy Waters III, Pods, Moses Moody, anyone on this roster can actually fill. FTW Clan says, like a multi-team deal. Yes, I didn't think about it. Yeah, 3-team trade where Melton goes to a rebuilding team. The rebuilding team gives a reasonable rotation player to Minnesota and Dante goes to the Warriors. Yeah, I can see that. That's a move where it could work. Yep, I'm with you. I didn't think of that. Well played. Alrighty, we might finish up on there. That's a good note to finish up on because you're probably more in tune than I am right now. I'm just disappointed after a game like today. I'm a bit down and out. It's like, just disappointing. 17 points up late in the third quarter. Feel like you've got it under control, and then just like that, the game slips away, and the Warriors just didn't have an answer whatsoever for the momentum that the Spurs produced, and their home crowd got behind them there in the fourth quarter, and it all happened rather meekly, it must be said. Like, it was a meek performance from the Warriors in the fourth quarter. They just didn't show anything in the face of the Spurs coming at them. So, I mean, it's an 82-game season. It's one game. It's disappointing, but it's not the end of the world. Spurs, as we've said, are a good team. Warriors' third game in 4 nights. Bench not playing very well, just not hitting shots, turnovers. Spurs getting some clutch offensive rebounds. FTW Clan says, can I ask you how you became a Warriors fan? I became a Warriors fan in 2014. So I never really followed basketball as a kid. It was the one sport I never followed. Grew up loving sport, obviously, playing tennis, cricket, Australian rules football, heap of different sports. Basketball wasn't one of them. Bogut, question mark. No, not Andrew Bogut. So I started watching basketball about just over 10 years ago. And it was because once I turned 18, this is a funny story. Once I turned 18, the first thing I wanted to do was sports betting because I loved sport. And I wanted to have a gamble on sport, which I still do occasionally, but not overly too much. And obviously basketball being on every day is a blessing and a curse for sports bettors because you can make money rather quickly and you can also lose money rather quickly. But I had a couple of mates who knew a little bit about basketball, and so we started betting on it a little bit. And I thought, I probably need to know something about it and actually need to start watching it if I'm going to be betting on this stuff. And so started watching it and basically started seeing the Warriors play. This was just before their first championship, the 4 obviously in the past decade. Got on at the right time, really. Yeah, if you want to call me a bandwagon, to go for it. But at least I didn't get on, after the first championship or, after KD joined or anything like that. But yeah, I basically started watching the Splash Brothers play and fell in love with them, particularly Clay. Like I always say, Clay's the guy that made me fall in love with basketball and with the Warriors. And so I'll be forever indebted to him. And that's basically how it happened. But Andrew Bogut, as an Australian, obviously him playing for the Warriors at the time. Yeah, I don't know not sure if that played a huge role in it, but maybe potentially. FTW Clan says, speaking of sports betting, I do it every day, and I did a 6-man parlay on the Warriors game tonight, and the only pick that missed was Chris Paul fantasy by 0.4 points. Stiff. Very stiff. It's needed over 29.5 fantasy, and he finished with 29.1. Yeah, that's sports betting for you. That's sports betting for you. If we won every bet of our we call it in Australia, we call it multis, but if we won all of our multis or parlays that we lost by a leg, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be off in a yacht in Croatia or something, thoroughly enjoying life and living it up because we'd all be quite rich. But that's not how it works, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm going to finish it up. Nearly 40 minutes in. Thank you, FTW Clan and everyone else that has commented, or if you're watching this on the replay on YouTube or via the podcast feed. If you haven't subscribed already, that would be greatly appreciated. Follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter, or Golden State with Mates, as well as on Instagram and TikTok. Warriors play the Brooklyn Nets. We're going to see some potential trade targets. Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith. Some potential players that may be Warriors down the track sometime in the next few months. That'll be on Monday at Chase Center. Hopefully the Warriors can get a bounce back win and move to 13-4 in that one. Probably do a post-game live after that. So be sure to tune in. Until then, guys, have a great rest of your weekend.